and I just like to move, okay? So I'm going to just try to be mindful of that. Like she said, I was born and raised here in Henderson County. And the thing about it is, I have been probably telling stories ever since I was, as far as I can talk. Because I would tell my grandmama all kinds of stories to get out of trouble. And whatnot. But anyway, my background is children. I love children. Started at the YMCA with storytelling at the YMCA. And from there, it just went on. One of my best storytellers and an individual that my goal is to be like him. And he's the best storyteller in the world. And that was my Savior Jesus, And I'm sharing that with y'all. I'm not trying to say, proselytize anything like that, but I want to just share that with you. Because I think he's a fantastic storyteller. And if you ever listen to his stories, there's so much that you can learn. Never try to force anything off on anybody, but just lay it out there and let you peel the onion and go deep as you want to be. But I'm real happy to be here today to talk about the kingdom of the happy land. But I think one of the things that I find is our history is so much history that we're not taught. And one of the things that I would suggest or challenge you guys to do is when you hear something, always I wonder who's not involved. Where were they at? And what kind of perspective would they give if they were telling the same story? So think about that. Challenge yourself from that. Because a lot of times when we hear things, it's always from one person's perspective. And sometimes we have a tendency to lock on that, and then we'll lock out everything else. And everybody here has a different perspective of your life. Someone can see it from a different way. The kingdom of happy land. Now think about it. That is something marvelous that we don't hardly hear about. And I heard about it back in about 2000. I heard a little bit of things when you grow up in a small town like this. You hear things, but when you're young, you don't gravitate to it. I wish that I could go back and sit on my grandmother's, by her feet, and I would pay more attention to what she talked about. More attention to Mr. Frank and my granddaddy, Joe, who used to be a graveyard digger. I wished I would have paid a little bit more attention to that. I wished I would have paid a little bit more attention to when the men gathered and they were talking about what work that they did and how they did it. And even when the women were in the kitchen and in the churches cooking, to be able to be quiet, like a fly on the wall, and listen. There would be so much that I could have learned. I heard things about the kingdom from like Mr. Mims, he worked with Mr. Pilgrim, who was a funeral director, and I didn't pay attention to it. And he would talk about his mother that she mentioned about the kingdom. Of course, it just went over my head. But one reason I got really involved in it, we did a play. There was a group of us that we did a Black History Month. We would do programs. And one of the programs was the Kingdom of the Happy Land. One of the things that you've got to realize, we always are fascinated with the kingdom and the people and who they were and where did they come from. But we also have to realize the time of that day. You got to realize when you talk about history, you say, I wonder why I'm not reading any more about black history and from a black person's perspective. The reason being is you got to realize when slaves came into the United States or South America or wherever they went, Jamaica, one of the things that they would not allow to do was read. We're going to start off this story like this. A long time ago, there was darkness covered everywhere. And then there was one place. And that place was Africa. In Africa, first there were trees and bush. And then there were birds of the air and fish in the water. and then there were people. And these people in the land of Africa, they love to tell stories. They love to tell what they saw. And they love to tell about what they do and what they dreamed and how they felt. And this was marvelous. But then ships came. And these ships took these people away and made them slaves and took them to a place called Jamaica. And in Jamaica, they had them work in the sugar plantations. And it was hard work. It was hard. They worked from sun up to sundown. And the only thing they had was stories. Because those were the things that they took with them, was the stories. And even when slaves came to America, and South America, and other places that used them, they always told the stories. And one thing that you can realize is that on the plantation, people were treated differently. And I don't know if you are aware of it, but I became aware of books that back during the Depression, when the United States was in depression, they were trying to find work for people, and there was individuals that wanted to write. So the government came up with stories that they gave these individuals an opportunity to go, and they interviewed individuals that were slaves during the time right after the Civil War. A lot of these individuals were 80 and 90 years old, but they started out in North Carolina, and then they went to South Carolina, and then they took stories from Virginia and Kentucky and Texas. Now, there was a lot of people that thought that this was a waste of money. Hey, we don't need to have this. But the information they got was invaluable. And these are personal stories from individuals that they remembered when they were slaves and what life was like on the plantation. Because when you talk about the kingdom of the happy land, you got to remember, these guys were set free. And it was from then that they eventually came here and said, what drove them? Why didn't they stay where they grew up? Why didn't they stay and try to make a life where they lived? But this was during the time of probably 1865, 66. Some of them probably remembered the old country of Africa. They remembered how things were. They remembered how they worked together on a village and how the whole community came together. Those are one stories. If you ever go back and look at your history, look and research about some of the cities of Africa, some of the things that were built. Did you know that in one country they had more pyramids than even in Egypt? But we don't hear about that. There was a city that had a wall that was almost, it wasn't as big as the wall of China, but it was there in Africa. Has anyone ever heard about that? Those are things that we don't hear about. But eventually what we do hear, we always hear about the jungle and the individuals and how they were, weren't even people. But we were. And we have great abilities. We have great artistic abilities, singing abilities. But those things we don't hear about. And unless we learn them, and we ask questions about them, and we talk about them, no one will ever know. And one of the books in North Carolina is, it says, what was it? Yeah, my folks won't let me talk slavery. My folks won't let me talk about slavery. Why is it that you think that we as blacks do not talk about slavery? Think about that. Why is it that we don't talk about it? You always move toward that what you talk about. Flip back, flip up. Everybody say flip back, flip up.
Flip back, flip up.
When you flip back, how many of you ever been in an accident?
Been what?
Been in an accident. Car accident, fell off a roof while he's working, hit your fingers. Think about it. Anytime that you drive back to that place, what do you remember? You remember the emotions. And it's almost like you are reliving that same thing. As me, and I can't speak for all black people, but I can speak for myself. When I was younger, it was very difficult for me to talk about slavery. Because the things that you hear about slavery is slaves were, they weren't a whole person. They were ignorant. They were like little children. Those are the things. And that's not who I am. That's not who I wanted to be. So for me to talk about that, I had to go within myself and to realize what a wonderful people that black people are and the gifts that they have. But that's not something that's taught in schools, in some colleges. And if you think about what they're talking about today, it's taking, talking about slavery as being, what was it? What word am I talking about? It was like a part of it, not forced immigration. It's a word like that they're talking about in Texas, changing the history and not talking about slavery. But how are we going to go forward if we don't talk about it? We need to address it, we need to talk about it, and we need to listen. In this story right now, the kingdom of the hand on a plantation. They said that he had a little bit more education than most because his master allowed him to learn things. But now we say that, I want you to think from my perspective. Okay? A lot of times, blacks were around and we worked and we were slaves. But one of the things that we do, and we still do today, and I still do today, is this. It's just like children. You think about it, child be sitting at your foot, you think they playing attention to everything that you say. So there's different kind of education. So the thing about it is, they said that he was a leader. And after slavery, he decided that they wanted to go to a place where they could call their own. But now if you think about it, it was more than that. He was not just a leader. They probably talked about, what are we going to do after slavery? Things were not as easy as you think that they were. And if you read any of the stories that the people in these books talked about what happened around slavery and the things that they went through, you would say, man, if I was in that situation, how would I feel? What would I do? Where would I go? Slaves didn't have own anything. So these guys, when they left, and they talked about leaving, where they were going to go, it was during a time of great turmoil. You had the South, the plantation owners that were used to having a lot of monies, had riches, had privilege, and all of a sudden it's down. What are they going to do with their slaves? They couldn't work anymore. They couldn't force them to work any longer. And these guys that had worked at some of these plantations, they decided, hey, I don't want to work anymore. They got to pay me from now on. So there was a lot of that turmoil. You got people that didn't believe that slaves should be free. And in the books they talked about the Ku Klux Klan. And they talked about when the Yankee soldiers came and they went in through the houses and they were taking hams and food and cattle and the horses. They needed that for the war. And a lot of slaves, they said, we let those animals go because we didn't want the Yankees to get them. Some of them, there was individuals, they liked being enslaved. The reason being, you got to look at the reason why. They didn't have the security after slavery. Because now, where were they going to go? They were promised a mule and 40 acres. And in the book, they said, I never saw anything about that mule. I never saw that mule. You know, I never saw that mule. They didn't have the land. And if they did have the land, what do you think the individuals around them wanted? They wanted to have, they needed to take that back because that was their land. So here, Montgomery talked about it, and I could just imagine him saying, guys, we got to go. We got to go someplace where we can be like in Africa, where we can be free. We can be a people. Where you going to go? I don't know. But I'm going. Now, I'm not staying here down here in Mississippi. The memories that I have, I've seen my mama's, you know, sold off. I've seen my brother's sold off. I don't know where they're at. I'm going a different place. I got to find another place. There's got to be another place. And they started leaving. And then other people said, well, you know something, I want to go with you. Because there's safety in numbers. Like you can realize, the soldiers, the Union soldiers were there, and they were supposed to be protection, but it wasn't always true. You had the Ku Klux Klan that was there. You had individuals, plantation owners were probably upset. They lost everything. Who are they going to take things out on? So these guys said, we got to go. I'm going to go. And then before you know it, you had maybe 3 or 4, 5 or 6, and they headed out. Now think about it. What would it be like? Travel. Only thing that you have is the clothes on your back. Going through a place that probably didn't want you. War-torn. It wasn't like it used to be. But yet they had to make it day by day. Now from Mississippi to North Carolina, that's probably about 700 miles. We think about that like that. We get in the car and we drive that in no time. But you think about it on foot. Women, children. What are they going to eat? And I would imagine that as they started moving, they would maybe come to a place that they say, hey, God, you know, I need some help in my feet. How about helping? If you do this, I'll give you this. Or we'll do this for you. Do you want to stay? Come on, you know, I'll pay you good. And you probably had some that would stay. But then Montgomery said, no, I've got a better vision. I just need some provisions to help me get to the next day. And they kept moving. And as they moved, they, at night, sit around the fire. Probably sang some of the old songs that they sang in the fields that brought them joy. They talked about things that they remembered. The older ones talked about how it was in Africa. Because they could remember. The young ones didn't. They may have known, the only thing that they'd known was what was here in the United States. Some of them didn't even know their language. Because that was one of the things that was taken away from them. And think about this. I know we always talk about, well, where's the journals? Why didn't they write it down? Remember, it was against the law for slaves to read and write. And if they did have a master that, an owner that taught them how to read and write, if they got caught, they got in trouble. So it was something that they had to do by sneaking around. One story was that one little girl, she was a playmate of one of her master's children. And that's how she learned a little bit of the letters. Not as much, but she learned some. But what would the journals be of slaves if they did write? Master beat me today. I saw my mama be sold. I saw a slave that ran away, got caught, and he came back, and they gave him 50 lashes. Or we didn't have anything to eat. If you ever get a chance, there's a book by Jonathan Twitty. It's called The Cooking Gene. He talks about, from a culinary perspective, of how the blacks made an impact in just the cooking of the United States. From Africa to here. And how they used the different ingredients, but yet you don't hear too much about those cooks. And if you think about it, who did most of the cooking on the plantations? Day by day. Thomas Jefferson had a son that when he went to France, took his son, who was a slave. And he taught him, sent him to school because when Jefferson got back, he loved to entertain. But he also liked to have good cooking. And when the slave went to Africa, as soon as he stepped off the boat on France's soil, he was free. But when he came back, he's back enslaved again. So think about that perspective, about the cooking. And who did like a lot of the blacksmithing? These guys learned, they had the skills, yet they were not given the credit for that. But here they are on that trail from Mississippi. And I would love to learn what the route was. One of the things I've done is went through Ancestry.com and tried to find some of the plantations. Because if I want to find out about those individuals, I've got to find out the plantation owners. Because it's only through their records that we can find out who those people were. Because people were not, they were listed as tables or chairs or possessions, yes, possessions, or cattle. And they were listed and only by their first name. So I've got to find out who those individuals were. And that's what Mr. Twilly did when he's cooking. He found out where his people, his ancestors, what plantation they lived on. And do you know that when he did this, those individuals welcomed him. He thought, man, he said, hey, don't push me off. But they didn't. They took him on tours of the plantation, and he talked about what he knew. He shared what they shared to him, what they father and all like this. And it was healing for both. Now, he didn't get that welcome everywhere. But when he did get it, it was wonderful. So think about Montgomery. And here they were trapped. And as they picked up people and they lost people, and how did they end up here? On the border of North and South Carolina. I could only imagine. I think about in South Carolina, where, and even down in Florida, during the times when it got so hot and mosquitoes, and they said, we need to go up to the mountain. We will go up here and have us a place. We would take our slaves with us. And in Flat Rock, in Henderson County, even before it was Henderson County, they had a large number of slaves. However, during the census, those slaves weren't listed because the individuals that bought them, they didn't live in Henderson County. So there was probably more slaves in Henderson County that's on the census. But think about this, traveling back and forth. Those slaves probably say, you know something? I know a place. When I was a slave, we used to go up here, man, it was wide. I mean, you go up this mountain, and it was like a winding staircase. And that's what they called that Saluda grave. And that was also became known as the Buncombe County Turnpike, where a lot of travelers went through there. Davis, Mr. Davis, that owned it just for that. He saw an opportunity that the Grovers that was coming from the lowland, and they would come going to places like Asheville and other areas, that they could come and they could stop. And he had a place that, and it's written, it is noted, where's that book at? Y'all gotta bear with me. I had my grandson. He stayed with me last night. It was unexpected. Oh my goodness, he's 6 years old. I woke up and man, there was stuff everywhere. I said, oh no, nice. But this book, Early Travel Accommodations in Henderson, between South, on the road to Greenville County and South Carolina and surrounding areas. And it talked about the places that individuals, when they were selling their wares and when they were traveling, the places to stop. That were good places to stop. Just like during I guess the 50s and 60s during Jim Crow, the Green Book. You know, blacks had a place that they, okay, you can't go here, but here's a place that you can go. These guys had places that they knew that they could stop at. And Mr. Davis's place was known to have good accommodations. A table that was laid out with all kind of variety of foods and vegetables and meats. And it was already set up like that. And he had slaves. And I'm not for sure, I only think that he, and this is a question that comes before me, I wonder how many slaves that he had. I knew he had a lot of acreage, but how many slaves did he have? What were the buildings like? Where did they live? Because this was a place that they were going to end up at. But then during the war, between the North and the South, the Civil War, things happened. And you know how what that does with travel? Just like traveling now, 9/11. We probably don't go think, we think a lot before we get on an airplane. It curtails how we're going to travel. The war did that here. People stopped traveling because it was war. There was conflict. But soon after the war, it started back up again. And even before then, Mr. Davis, his slaves, they were free. And what do we do when we get, after we get out of high school? We live in a place. I'm shaking this dust off. I ain't staying in this town. I'm going someplace else. And that's, I'm just thinking, that's what his slaves say, hey, I can't stay here. I'm going someplace else. And that, yet you had individuals that was free from Mississippi. They say, I'm leaving here. I'm going someplace. Who knows? They may have met. But anyway, as they got close to South Carolina, I'm thinking that some of them talked about Flatline or this area. Not the place, but just the wilderness, the land. They had memories of what it was like. And by that time, it swelled from 50 to maybe 100 until they came up to a place. Someone that was receptive of coming in. And maybe it wasn't that they were planning to stop here. Mr. Davis was passed by that time. But his wife, Miss Sarepta, she was still alive. And maybe she didn't have the guest houses, we may call it. And things was being run down. People weren't coming. She couldn't manage. Because she didn't have the servants, she didn't have the slaves. It was just her and her daughter. What were they going to do? And oh, Lord, and the whole group of people, hey, we need a place to stay. And before they stopped, maybe they saw it. And they said, maybe that house. And in our play, this is how we wrote. You come up and say, man, this is a place. I did a scout. And there's a house up there. It looks like a lot of land. And the farm, it doesn't look like it's been kept up. Or maybe we ought to go. Who's going to go? I don't know. You go. I don't know. Hey, think about it. They could hang us. Are they going to be receptive of me being black? You know how they treat us? They got the courage to go up. And go up to us. Man, we're passing through. Is there any work that you got? We'd be awful obliged if we can sow your field out there. We can pull it up, gather up some of the things and bring it to you. If we could just have a little bit of it. And maybe she said, you know, it's just me and my daughter. I'll tell you what, go ahead and do it. Whatever you bring, we'll be much obliged. Well, now, we only passing through. But I saw a couple of cabins out there, and we got women and children. And we've been traveling. Where y'all traveling from? Oh, man, we started out in Mississippi. Oh, my Lord. Receptive of it. But go ahead and spend the night. And who knows, maybe by the night, her daughter, I could imagine, Mom, you know them people? You know how it is when you got somebody knocking on your door? Can I come in and use the telephone? You know them people. Come in here. Go on away. No. They're dangerous. You Maybe they let them stay a day. They bought some things in. Maybe they stayed alone. You know how it is. You get your family members and they're supposed to be gone by Saturday. They hang around to Sunday. They hang around to Sunday. Sorry. They hang around to Sunday. You say, oh Lord, when they gonna go? Yeah, but you know, they did cut that grass. You know, ain't like Uncle Bob. But think about it. And these guys, I guarantee you, they saw an opportunity. They said, hey, let's go ahead and let's do some stuff. Who knows? They just probably work. That's what I do. I go to a job. I look around and see what needs to be done. I don't wait for somebody to tell me to do it. I do it. Because I want to plan in the mind, hey, here's somebody I could use. He's good with those kids. He's got some character that I love. And maybe from that point on, it moved from a day to a week, or maybe to a month. And that's where relationships come in. People talk, and they get to judge your character. They get to see you not from the outside, but from the inside. But we still have to remember that there's still a divide. And back during the day, we got a lot of division. Black and white. North and south. Slave owners and non-slave owners. So there's a lot of things that's happening that books sometimes don't talk about. That as we read, and as we learn, and as we study, we need to plant that and think about those questions. What would I do? How would I deal with this? But eventually, they did stay. And my question is, how many houses was it? How many slaves did Mr. Davis own? I think when I looked at the list, he may have owned 12. I don't know, that's what was listed. There were other individuals like Mitchell King, I think he, between 30 and 50. I think the highest here in Henderson County was like maybe 50 or so. I don't know. Others was 2, 3, 1, 1. And they got a list of them. And if you go to Jenny Giles does an excellent job of looking that up through if you go online and you look up the Hendersonville Heritage, the website, it'll pull you up and there's different stories of Henderson County that she's researched. But here those individuals were. And everything that they bought with them, they bought the skills. Okay? They bought the skills. Within probably a period of time, they built that back up. Because by that time the war was over, people were needing to get their goods to market. People were starting to travel. And these individuals, this community, Kingdom of the Happy Land, provided what was needed for individuals and for themselves. And at some point, they came up that they wanted to own this land. I don't know how that came up. And my question is, that I always put in, these individuals didn't have a background in finance. They may not have understood the law. Okay? They understood about being bought and being sold, but they didn't understand about owning land and paying taxes. They probably heard about it, but they didn't know about it. Okay? But they did the best that they could from a memory of first coming together as a group. How many of us could come in as a group and say, hey, yeah, what I earned, I'm throwing it in the pot. We probably have families that live together and we don't do that. Everybody lives separate. Oh, this is my egg. I'm cooking. Well, that's my pan. You know, you can't cook your egg in my pan. That's all right. I'll just drink it. But think about it. These guys came together and they worked together. They went to work for surrounding people of that area. earn money. And they came in and they put it together. Because the goal was to own their own piece of property. And it prospered. It prospered. Now, people say it was on the line, which was of North and South America. I mean, South Carolina. South Carolina. And it was because if they ever had any trouble, I don't know, the clan from South Carolina, or people from there, all they had to do was move over to North Carolina. Come on, guys, y'all move on over. And vice versa. Okay? And vice versa. I wonder about the education. It was said that Miss Luella Montgomery, Robert was not married, but that was probably because, like in Africa, they had a king and they had a queen. And someone said that she was one that did the education and taught and schooled the children. I don't know. And those are stories that we won't hear. I wonder about that. And the only way that I can learn from that is learn through the black history that's scattered about Henderson County, about the schools, in Edmonville, and Fletcher, and Brevard, and during the time of segregation. Because that gives me an idea that they knew education was important. But these individuals worked, and they came and they put in their monies until they got enough monies to buy between 175 to 200 acres. I think in the deed it says about 180. Miss Jenny Giles said it was about 180 acres. And they've got a deed that 10 years later that her daughter was the one that sold. And it's listed in the deed. I've got to go and look that up too. Okay? But eventually, I can imagine it would take about that long. Because we wouldn't get paid $3.65 an hour, $11 an hour, $12 an hour. It was just what you could get. But from that, you had individuals that hired their services out, and they came in, and they started to build a place for themselves. They said it was Ezekiel Couch. He was one that, they said, now I've heard two stories. He was living on the kingdom, but then there was a pastor that traveled around, and he heard about the kingdom, so he went to Tennessee. Every place that he went, he was preaching. He told people, listen, you need to go up here to, in North Carolina, there's a place of kingdom of the happy land. If you have any problems, you can go there and stay. And they said it swelled up to maybe about 400 people. I don't know. But as time goes on, what happens? How many of you been to the library lately? Check out books. Now, let me ask you a question. Do they have those dates that they stamp in the back of the books now? No. They don't, do they? Or the card that they used to slide to tell you what date it was, who had it out? No. What happens? Progress. And during that time, people use wagons to sell their ware, their produce. And when they drive their pigs, things to market. But what happened? Railroad. And as the railroad came, it was more efficient, more faster, quicker. People changed their habits. And the areas started to grow. Hendersonville, those places. Fighting whether where they're going to have the township at. Is it going to be River Road? I don't know if y'all know that story. Look it up. River Road. Two factions fighting whether or not they're going to have, going to build on the river or you're going to build on the road. Just like politics and all of it. People fighting against everything. But things change. And as children change, I don't want to do like my uncle did. I don't want to be a farmer. I want to go out here and make some money. I can go out here and work for so-and-so, keep in her house, and I can make my own money. I need to live where young people, I need to live where other people are. These people, oh, I need to go where the young people are. I need to make more money. So they started to disperse. The kingdom had served its purpose. It had a place that people gathered, safe, and were able to grow. But with that, change. Where is it written at? You got to realize that these individuals were surviving. They were out for survival. They were working 10, 12 hours a day probably. Every little bit that they got was going to purchase the property. It wasn't personal, it was for everybody. And this is how it was. There was, and I wonder how many of them were literate. Now when we think about literate, we think about, oh man, if somebody can't read or write, they ain't smart. That's not true. It's not true at all. Because there's other kind of smartness. People work with their hands. People work with numbers. People can do things. You ever hired anybody? You got a big company, they come in and want to do some stuff. It looks good. Sometimes you get mad when they get things. Man, look at this. I could have done that. They got to come back out again. You know, these guys are, you know, artists. There was one other one, and discrepancy with this. Blacksmith that lived in, they said he lived on the Kingdom of Happy Land, opened up a blacksmith shop in East Flat Rock, or in Flat Rock. Said people came from miles around to have their horses shoed, because not only could he shoe a horse, but he knew how to work with their gait to get them to walk right. If they had problems with their shoes, how he could fix that. How he could work with, you know, the rheumatism that they may have, the animals may have had. He was not only just a blacksmith, but he also was a veterinarian. He and his son, I can't remember his name right off the bat, but he and his wife, when they married, I think they had about 11 kids. But now I read another place that he was owned somewhere, he was owned by a person in Etowah. So I don't know. And how do you learn this? You got to go back to who owned it, to the plantation owners, and search through the archives of the census and do history on those individuals to learn where these individuals went to. And that's what it's about. And that's the excitement of it. Now people, when you start reading things and you look at, if you ever pick up one of these books and you read it, you're going to read some stuff in here that you're going to say, man, don't take it personal. And I'm talking to white people. Don't take it personal, okay? Don't take it personal. It's in history. We can't change the past, but we can, you know, affect the future. Don't take it personal. Read it and understand what was happening during that time. And when you do read it, ask yourself, is that me? Do I feel that way? Then guess what? It's all good. You can only control what you do, not the person sitting next to you. And that's what we got to realize. I'm my own person. I can read it. I can feel the pain, the empathy, and I can hear it. And that's what we need to hear. I need to listen. I got a friend of mine, and we always talk about North and South. We don't agree, but I listen. And sometimes does it make me angry with some of the things he says? It makes me, I don't say angry, it makes me uncomfortable and upset. But I have to see it from his perspective. And he's reading some of these books right here. And I know when he reads it, it's going to make him upset. But I'm asking him to read from my perspective. He's looking at it from north and south. I'm saying that's good. But now look at it as people to people. sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. So when you start reading and you start doing your history, ask yourself, we do plays with raising money for the historic courthouse and whatnot, and a lot of it is from the Henderson County perspective. We do the Walk of Fame, and that's where we're looking at individuals that have done things for Henderson County that's lasting impact on Henderson County. And then people say, well, my goodness, where are the black people? I said, well, you've got to realize that when you do choose this, it's different. I said, a lot of times you may not have a black that was adopted, born out, or had a lot of money. However, that does not mean that the impact that they had on their community is not as important, or the impact that they had on the total community. Hey, I hear you. I'm hurrying, I promise. They children, so y'all don't let that disturb you. We know how that is.
Yeah, we know how that is.
We know how that is. But what you got to be able to do is think from that perspective. Okay? You got to think from that perspective. Because if we were to just go with, people that had a lot of the monies or had the power, the politics, you probably wouldn't have many women, or you wouldn't have people in the minority. But when you see it from a different perspective, you say, I wonder what so-and-so was doing. I wonder what the Native Americans were doing. Were they in here? Who were they? What were they doing? And was what they did impactful? And we have to spread that onion out, because we may see that it was. It just wasn't talked about. It just wasn't written about. How many of you like the Lone Ranger? Do you know that his character was based on a man named Bass? And he was the first black marshal on the west of the Mississippi. West of the Mississippi. He was a slave, and his owner took him to war with him to be his body servant. And somehow they were getting in a card fight, and he got in a fight, and he beat up his master, and then he had to run away. But he went up, and he hid out with the Indian nations. And he learned to speak several different dialects of the Native Americans. In the dialects, and you know what he did? He said, I need this guy, because he's going to have to be doing this. And they said that he ended up arresting almost 3,000 people. Shot. He never killed 14 people. He was never shot. Had his hat shot off and had his belt shot off, but he was never shot. And he ended up having to arrest his son for murder. And he said that almost killed him. His son killed his wife, and he said, no, I'm going to go get him. And he went and got him. And he arrested him. But those are the individuals that we don't know about as, people that has done great things. You like the National Forest, right? The forest, you like to go to Yosemite and places like that. Did you know that it was the Buffalo Soldiers? I can't remember which cavalry unit. It was an all-black Buffalo Soldiers. After they disbanded, those were the guys that were protecting the West in the National Forest. They were the ones that were doing that. But we don't know about that. And we as black, and I can say this, me as black people say, you want to go out in the woods? Man, I ain't going out in the woods. I ain't going out in the woods. What you mean out in the woods? And guess what? And why is that? Because I never see other black people out there in the woods. Guess what? We're protecting the woods. We don't know about those things. I love the woods myself. I love hunting and things like that. But those are things that, stereotypes that we hear. And our children will hear that. And they will think that unless we change it. And I need to know it. and you need to know it as well, talking to your kids when they see things on TV and it portrays it a certain way, because it's not said directly, but here we're thinking about it. And we need to ask those questions. Is that true? And we need to look for those differences to say, that's not true. Or there's another part of the story to it. But anyway, kingdom of happiness. Dispersed. And you can understand why dispersed, right? You can understand. And you probably say, well, why didn't they keep the land? Did they know about taxes? When they came together, it was a communal. It was everybody together. Somebody has to come up and say, I want this land. But as black people, we don't do that. Did you know that there has been so much? A lot of times we go with, what is it? When your heirs, me and you, we family, our mama passes away, and we say, well, that's ours. But we take advantage of it because companies come in and say, yeah, guess what? Ron goes up to New York, lives. I'm going to say, listen, let me buy your property. I ain't down there anymore. I may sell it. Or they go to the court and say, listen, it's better if we sell this property all at once. We want this property. We lose so much property because why did we didn't trust the courts? Think of doing the Jim Crow. If I went to the courthouse, ooh, wait a minute, could I go in the courthouse? It was segregated. Blacks on one side, I mean, not, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to sit on a good deal. So the only way I can do it is by not knowing the law. And before you know it, the property is gone. They lived there for so long, was their graves. I know they died. Where the graves at? Where the gravestones at? Did y'all know it was forested? Trees were cut down at least 3 times since the 1900s. So people went in, they saw money, they saw how we could make some money by logging these trees. If I'm going in the log and making money, I see a gravestone, I ain't going to say nothing. Why? Because that means they're going to make me stop. It's going to put a hold on me. That's happening not only that, but other places. So there's not a lot of history, but we gotta do better. We gotta do better. I gotta do better. We all gotta do better, just inch by inch. One thing, that's all. All right, I know y'all got questions. I've been talking too long. Y'all supposed to go like this. Where's my wife at? Where's my wife? Where's my wife? Yes, sir.
What was the sort of maximum number of people that lived in the camp?
Well, they said it was almost 400, but we don't know because, you know, the records, you could go by the census, you know, but the census is only as accurate as individuals go in, and you know how it is today. It's a neighborhood. I don't know if I want to go in that neighborhood. You know, I'm serious.
Do you have a timeline on, you said 18?
It was probably from 1867 to 1868, but it depending on who you talk to.
But then when
this
did
will
they
distort.
begin to disperse?
I'm thinking it's going to be between around the 1900s, even before then.
So it's about
When it disperses, you got to realize it's not all at once. Everybody doesn't pick up all at once.
right.
It's a little bit at a time before you look around and there's only 1 or 2 that's left. It's just like the great migration that blacks did after World War I when they went up north. It didn't happen all at once. It was just scattered. Before you know it, you look around and say, whoa, people gone. Where they at? We need help.
Now, where is this property located now and who owns it?
Um,
I'm sure there's a few people, but
yeah, there's a few people that owns a little bit of property. Huh?
I know.
Come on, stand up, tell us. Because I've been on some of the property one time, okay? But not the whole property. Tell us. What's your name?
I'm Clara Carter.
Clara. Everybody say, hello, Clara. Tell us.
All right. It that little town of Tuxedo, and Camp Green Cove. It's on the back of Green Cove Camp. And I went up there one time on horseback. There are 2 foundations left, and one may have been the queen and one may have been the king, and they were brother and sister, I understand. But it goes up toward Heatherly Heights. Like you said, it's right where the border between South Carolina and North Carolina is.
Okay.
And let's see, this man that worked for our family was kind of the caretaker, was illiterate, I understand, and he was from the kingdom, but he was smart.
What was his name?
Perry Elijah.
Perry Elijah. Okay.
We're not certain of that, but
Yeah.
that's probably where he was from.
And see, that's the thing about history. You hear things and people, and you can't lock out and say, oh, that ain't true. You got to say, okay, let me hear this and let's look for it. You got to dig deeper. Anybody else has anything? Yes.
Clara, what was your, is that your maiden name?
What?
Is that your maiden name?
Smith.
Smith is your maiden name? Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Come on. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a storyteller. I don't know everything, but my thing is I love to research and learn. And if it's something that wasn't true, I would not tell you unless I tell you. Now, this is a story. Okay? But it's going to be based on a lot of truth. Yes, ma'am. And tell us your name.
I'm Reverend Laura Wilkerson.
Miss Wilkinson, I heard about you, girl. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Tell us.
Well, it's no different than the way it is here in Saluda. The property here in Saluda now, the families have left. And they refuse to pay the taxes. It's not that they can't go in the courthouse, but it's they have family property, and just as you said, people feel like, oh, that's my family's property, but there is a responsibility. And the people do not accept the responsibility of not only keeping up the land, but also keeping up the houses. In fact, Susan with the land trust, Betsy with the land trust has had her hands full trying to get in touch with the different families here in Saluda area to not only find out if they want to pay, if they're going to pay the taxes, or come and even look at the land. They've just walked off. You know, a stir was told when we had a meeting at the church one day, and people feel like, well, that's my parents' property, and they got it for 40 acres and a mule. But you know, that's past. That's history. You have to come up and do what is right as far as not only legal rights, but you can't have anything if you don't keep it up. Or if you don't say, okay, I'm tired, and sell it. A lot of our properties, a lot of history, a lot of church history has been done away with.
Lost.
Because
Yes.
there is no one to keep records. And in the church now, we're asking people to, do you remember? Or we're going to the elderly and say, please give us, write down, let us know what your mother's name was, what your grandparents' name was, so that we can keep this history alive. You know, it's not because people are that illiterate. I think that a lot of times people just refuse to think back and remember when. You know, when I first came to Saluda over 40 years ago, they looked at me like I was something strange out of a cracker box. But when I came to Saluda, I let them know I was here. I walked that street, I said, hello, how y'all doing? You know, I'm not a hidden person, but a lot of people of color are hidden, or they feel like that they just don't want to take a part of the community.
If I could break in there, think about this. All right, and Ms. Williams, I'm gonna say the same. Okay, but anyway, it's you got to realize also that what is the percentage of blacks that live? Do you know the percentage of blacks that lives in Saluda?
Yeah, one.
So you would be considered, as my grandmama would say, you are fly in the buttermilk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We both flies in the buttermilk. But you got to look at it that way. But it's mostly about building relationships.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you guys one thing. Try to remember this. When you're looking for people to serve on boards and whatnot, and you say, I need somebody from a minority, build relationships, because I'm worked to death. I'm worked to death. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You know me. But your job is to get to know other people of diversity, of color. And then when you start planning things, don't plan it just around what's comfortable for you, but take into considerations that people, you know, that most people of color, we work in factories, you know, and do you know many factories that are off at midday that can let their people come out and serve on boards? Or at 5 o'clock, if you want a lady, a lot of times they got to go home and take care of families and things like that. So it's a little bit different. So you got to learn that in order to grow. And it's inch by inch. It's a cinch, not yard by yard. And if you get one you can build that relationship with, then it's always a continual learning. Somebody had their hand up.
This is about land ownership, and I'm fascinated. Remember in about the, even in our white history, the peasants, land ownership was not something they started even having until the 1100s, the time of the enclosures. People had a house and they farmed. Peasants, land ownership was not something they had in that. They had the king and the queen and they lived in the house or whatever, but the land was all commonly owned.
Yes.
So you take a whole different culture, and then let them free and say, okay, you know all the rules. Well, what I found with the black residents and land here is it's bad bookkeeping on our county's part. They'll send a bill to somebody that's been dead for 20 years and wonder why those people don't pay the taxes. And the government has no obligation to find out who owns it other than taking it to foreclosure. So it's just a whole different system, and I will say there are some people that have kept paying the taxes, and like the Speedy Sullivan land that is still all in one piece. All the people in that family, 6 or 8, as many as 13 families lived on one piece of land, but nobody was worried about who owned it. And it was almost like 30 acres of common land. And because of that, the family has kept it, even though there are 100 and something acres. Who knows? But it's a whole different culture. And white men want black people to know white men's rules right now. So maybe we should be learning from their culture and have some common land rather than making it so the poor people can't even buy themselves. Maybe we should, instead of saying white may learn our rules, maybe we should learn some of the heritage of the black community's rules. Sorry.
Thank you. But anyway, there's a lot. It's not black and white. It's just not this way or that way. It's about us coming together and listening to stories, learning, and realizing when I'm hearing it from my perspective, and I need to hear it from. It's just like Doc here, when he's talking to me about, something medical, I gotta hear from his perspective. I go, wait a minute, I'll do it that way, but I've gotta hear it from his perspective. I gotta hear it from where he's coming from, and then I gotta balance. Because there's some place in the middle. Just like as a patient, when I come in, he listens to me. When I tell him what my ailments are and what I do and how I eat, he's taking all of that into consideration. We have to do that as people. And we've got to learn the past. And actually what we got to do is relearn the past. Because there's a lot of history that we have not been taught. Okay? And people are taking advantage because of what we don't know. Okay? And 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I would not be able to stand up here and talk to you about this. Okay? But however, I have, went inside myself and know how important it is that I am a good person. And there's stuff that I don't know. And I need to learn. And I need to teach others about me and my people.